Hello, everyone. We can wait some minutes to see if there are more people connecting today. The Croatian people from your project just warned me that they cannot be connect today. So I don't know now how many people. So if we can wait few minutes. Cristina, ciao, ci sei?
Ciao, sì, ci sono.
Ciao. Posso chiederti magari se cioè, i colleghi della Croazia hanno detto adesso che non possono partecipare, quindi non
Sì.
so bene quante persone, se ci
Non
dai
te lo,
tu.
non te lo so dire neanche io. Vedo che però è collegato Natasha, Rock e Cristina from Slovenia. Cristina, just to know, Andrei is going to be connected or only you, Rock and Natasha will be
Yeah,
connected?
Andrei is coming, but I know that he had another meeting at 2, so maybe he will be a little bit late.
Ok.
Okay, so just waiting for Andrei and then you can start.
Ah, ok. And from the Italian part?
From the Italian partner, I don't know why. Allora, I sent a message to Guglielmo from from Andrea. Okay, he's answering now. Yeah, yes, I'm coming 5 minutes. Okay.
Yes, was
So, and
just
then I don't know if Davide Travaglini is going to be connected because I know that he has also some troubles today after meetings. So
it was just to understand when to start. Otherwise, in any case, we are recording the meeting, so it won't be a
yes,
problem.
but I guess that the important thing is to wait, if possible, to wait Andrei. When Andrei from Slovenia is connected, we can start.
Oh, okay. So
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Um,
Hello.
I see that also Andrei now is with
Hello.
us. Hello, Andrei. Also,
Hello.
Davide succeeded to connect. Okay. So
Okay, so we can start. So
yes, thank you.
thank you for being here. This is just a small meeting to introduce the IBP and how it works and the main use of IBP in order to allow you during the field trip to be already have some basis to work better. So I'm Serena Corezzola from Brema Italia, and there is also my colleague Serena Buscarini that will support me today. And yeah, so we will just explain a bit the IBP, and then let's say the more technical parts we will see directly on the field. It will be easier. And I'm recording the this meeting, so the colleagues that are not here, maybe they can update if they have the chance. So I will share my screen. Okay, tell me, can you see it? So this is a presentation that we use for training that we have done during LifeGo Pro 4. And it has been translated by our colleague Guglielmo Londi. And in this case, we use an extract, let's say, of this presentation, because usually we go a bit more in detail, but today is just to introduce the IBP. So maybe you have already seen this slide, but we will go a bit more in detail. So this is we presenting the potential biodiversity index, the IBP, that it has been set and created by the CNPF, so the National Center of the Forest Properties in France. And it has been used in France since 2008, so it has a quite long tradition now of testing and using it. And so the CNPF is a kind of organism, bodies that have the aim of transfer knowledge of innovative knowledge for the forest management. So they have created this tool in order to make a diagnosis on forest that allow to guide forest management considering biodiversity. So they have produced a lot of material and guides, aim to lots of targets. So to technicians first, so something really practical in order to apply this index in the field. And so with really detailed documents. But at the same time, IBP is a really strong, powerful tool for raising awareness in people not really technician, let's say, but also forest owners. So it's a way to increase awareness about the importance of biodiversity in forest and help to bring people near these important themes. So IBP has developed in France, but then it's being used in other countries. And so you can see this map. There are a lot of also North African countries that are applying it. Then the LIFE project Biogest has introduced it in Spain, in Catalonia, and the LifeGo Pro 4 has introduced it in Italy. And so there was the need to adapt, to see if the IBP that was used in France could be adapted to other areas, because of course these are almost, most of them are Mediterranean countries. So there was the need to make this tool working also for different contexts. So that's why it has born an international committee made of experts of all this area in order that every change, every integration of the IBP has to be discussed together and approved by all these people. So the committee meets like once or twice per year, and there has been already some changes that have been made to the original version of this index. And for example, just to make an example, in France there are like two different field sheets that you can use in based on the area you are working. So in the Mediterranean area, the field sheet is a bit different, for example, for some threshold, but then we will see it in detail. And the help of the committee was important to make this assessment and changes. So why to evaluate biodiversity in the forest? Because of course biodiversity is really important to make the ecosystem function. And for example, is the interaction among species. It affects the regeneration of forest, can help in control disease, and also have some impact also on the economical parts of the forest, because it helps the growth and the productivity of forest. So it's important for this, for really a wide range of reasons. And how you can assess biodiversity in forest? Of course, you can sample different taxa and make the checklist of every organism present, but that requires, of course, lots of people involved and with really specialistic skills, and the measurement, of course, are really complex. That's why IBP come to not measure biodiversity, the real biodiversity, but to try to evaluate aspects of forest that can have an influence on the biodiversity. And so, in a way, IBP tries to understand or to evaluate the potential of that forest of host biodiversity. So the IBP, in this case, doesn't require really specialistic knowledge and skills, but it can be easily applied by everyone with just a small training and practice. So the main aim of IBP, of course, is to evaluate, as I said, the capacity of the forest and to support the potential of the biodiversity. And it can help to understand which of these characteristics are already in a good state, or which one can be improved by forest management. So IBP work on 10 factors, the key factors related to forest biodiversity, and helps the daily management of forest. So it can be used at different level, at different scale. So for example, it can be used at a wide scale, like regional scale, in order to assess the relation between forest management and the biodiversity, but it can also be used in planning. So with the description of every single parcel, it is possible to understand where to act and in which ways, derived from the IBP diagnosis. And also it can be useful before an intervention without preliminary sampling. It can guide the kind of intervention that can be done in a particular forest, if we, of course, taking into account biodiversity. And so about the 10 factors, we have 7 factors that are directly affected by forest management, and other 3 factors that are related to the context, to the characteristic of forest. So this first 7 factors. We are going to see every one of them. Every factor has a point, a score of 5. So let's say the best IBP can reach 50 points of score. About these first 7 factors, we have, of course, the presence of native tree species. We evaluate the vertical structure of the forest. Then we evaluate the amount of deadwood, laying and standing deadwood, the presence of very large living trees, and the presence of 3 microhabitats on living trees. And then the presence of open areas. That is a habitat that can be associated to forest. And these are the factors that we can, in a way, change or impact with our forest management decision. And then the other 3 factors are the one related to the context. So forest management cannot really affect these 3 factors, but they just give us a picture of the forest. And so one is the forest continuity over time, and then the presence of other habitat that can be inside the forest. And of course, their presence can increase the potential of host biodiversity. So we are going more in detail of each factors. So the first one, IBP counts the number of native tree species, but in a simple way. I mean, you really do not count the tree species, but you count the genera of the species. And in forest, you evaluate only the trees that are above 50 centimeters of highness. And if you can guess a tree species on a dead individual, you can count also that. As you can see, every score has 5 points. And usually there is 0, 1, 2, and 5. These are the level that we can assign to each factors. In this case, we count in our sampling area the number of genera that we can see. And if you see, for example, there are two numbers, and the one with the asterisks are the thresholds that are valid, that are true for the Mediterranean region. As I said before, based on the area in which we are, we can use one field sheet or the other one. So this is something that we have to pay attention when we do the sampling of IBP. And so this is really easy. We just count native tree species, not non-native. And why? Of course, because native species can host lots of species that co-evolve with them. And for example, this is a picture of a study that show how, for example, they just evaluated insects and fungi. And as you can see, the number of species are more important related to native trees instead of the others. So that's why we count that. And also because on native species, we can find more specialized species and less common species as we can find instead of non-native trees. And of course, because having a wide range of different species can potentially host more species, because there are species directly, sorry, one moment. Sorry, there was a people entering and I distracted. Okay, so for example, in a stand there is a monospecific. Of course, the potential to host a species is less than another one that is a mixed forest, for example. Okay, so the factor B is the vertical structure. How we evaluate them with the IBP. we count the number of layers, and we count the leaves coverage that have to be at least 20% of our sampling area. So of course we do an estimate, and the layer in this case, it includes, it can include the same trees. So for example, these are the layers. We start from the herbaceous one and the shrubby ones. But if then we count the layers on the trees, so for example, if there is some branches on a big trees but are here under the 1.5 meters, we include it in this layer. So we have to evaluate the coverage of these layers. And these are the points assigned to the presence of one or more layers. And of course, why it is important, the presence of different layers, because there are species that spend most of their time on a single layer, but there are other species that depend on a complex stratification. For example, bats, they prey on a vertical, this is an example, for example, they prey on a vertical column, so the presence of all the layers is important. And these are big species, but if we also think about a smaller scale, about insects, also the continuity of the layers help that organism that do not spread that much. So that's why having more layer and having a high percentage of leaves help the presence of a higher biodiversity. Then the factor about deadwood, I think that everyone knows that deadwood is really important for saprophilic organisms, so it's an important element to evaluate in its presence in the forest. Here we see both factors C and D, so factor of standing deadwood, but also of laying deadwood. But we cite them together because then the measurements are more or less the same. So IBP counts the presence of deadwood, but just the largest one. So for example, if we're talking about standing deadwood, it has to be at least 1 meter high to be considered. And if we talk about laying deadwood, we have to consider pieces of deadwood that are at least 1 meter long. But then we evaluate the largest one. So it is considered large deadwood, the piece that have a diameter of more than 37.5 centimeters. And you can see there is another number that it is used, is the threshold for the Mediterranean area, for example. So IBP assign the higher score to the presence per hectare of at least 3 pieces of standing or laying big piece of deadwood. And otherwise, if there is no deadwood with this characteristic, IBP counts the one that's called medium deadwood, and that is characteristic always 1 meter high or long, but with a diameter comprised between 17.5 and 37.5 centimeters. So if we have just one, we can only obtain 1 point, for example, and we stop here with the diagnosis. So why it's important deadwood? Because of course, almost more or less 30% of species are related to deadwood, the saprophilic species. And also because in our European forest, more than 40% of saprophilic organisms are endangered because of the removal, usually the removal of deadwood. So it's really, the more we have and the more species we can, the forest can host. And if we think also about the importance of saprophytic organisms in their role of in the biochemical cycle, for example, and in the recycling of minerals and nutrients to the soil, they have a really important function for the functioning of ecosystem. Then the factor A, that are the very large living trees. The IBP counts the number of large living trees per hectare present in our sampling area, and assign the maximum points if we have at least 5 of them inside our area per hectares. And in parallel with the deadwood, if we don't have any very large trees, we count, we go and see if we have smaller trees, but consider large trees. And these are the range, sorry, I didn't say it before. A very large trees is considered a trees that have DBH more than 67.5 centimeter. If we don't have any of these, we consider the large trees that have this range of diameter, so more than 47.5 dBH. And why it is important to consider these elements? Okay, because of course, for example, in the Italian forest are really rare, so they have a value if they are in abundance in our forest, and they have a really high ecological value for the conservation of forest biodiversity, because, for example, big trees can support many species that need a background, a big background. For example, I make an example, bird of prey, they do large nests, and to do them, they need large trees to nest. Otherwise, they don't have the support, the right support to survive. And also, for example, big trees usually can, their crown can be above the canopy. And so there are species that are linked to the microclimatic condition of the higher layer that are more exposed to sun. So their presence can improve the presence of the species. And also there are some characteristics related to old trees that we cannot find on young trees. If you think about, for example, the aspect of the cork, of the bark, old trees, big trees can have a much rough bark that can host species instead of young trees that are really smooth, for example. And big trees have the potential to host a lot of different tree microhabitats. And this is the other factor that now we are going to see. So their presence can potentially improve the presence of species associated to big trees. And another important feature of old big trees is that they guarantee, it's an element that stays in time. If everything disappears around, they can be a source of recolonization for species that are related to them, and then they can spread again when there are the right conditions in the forest around. And I'm sorry for my English, so maybe if something is not well explained, I will ask for the help of Italian people, so I hope it will be clear. So another factor is microhabitat, tree microhabitat, bare on living trees. So IBP go and counts the number of living trees that bear tree microhabitat. And it divides this tree microhabitat in 15 categories. And this is the list of tree microhabitats. And you consider microhabitat only on living trees, because the ones that are present on dead trees, because there are microhabitat also on deadwood, They are count in the box, let's say, of that. And I won't go too much in detail about the microhabitat because we will see it will be really easier to see them in the forest. But in any case, together with the field sheet, the CNPF have produced some supporting documents. For example, for tree microhabitat, there is a sheet that with the images of every category of microhabitat. So it's also easier with the help of the images to detect them on trees. Let's say that you can have the maximum score if you have in your hectare of sampling at least 8 trees that are bearing some microhabitat of these categories. So, okay, this is the supporting sheet illustrating the different categories of microhabitat, with also some threshold to consider them or not, because these microhabitat are based on the integrate manual of catalog of tree microhabitat. I don't know if you have any idea of what it was. I mean, it's the integrate project. It's a European project that's above together with other things, it created a catalog, a really detailed catalog of tree microhabitat. So IBP used that base, but then tried to simplify it to make the detection really easier. So if you know that catalog, this IBP version is a bit easier and more quick to detect. So the last factor related to the forest management is the presence of open areas in our forest. For open areas, the IBP mean the surface on the ground that's in which you can register a change in the vegetation. And so it's the effects of the sun coming to the ground that can change the characteristic vegetation of the forest floor. So, so it doesn't mean that it is not only a really open area where you don't have any canopy on your head, but it can also be areas where the forest cover is a bit less dense, and so the light can reach the ground. And these have an effect on the presence of different kind of vegetation that usually is different from the typical forest herbaceous species. So the importance, let's say, is the capacity of this vegetation to produce flower. That flower, it will be the element that can improve, that can potentially host more biodiversity. And so these are, okay, the kind of open area that you can consider. So not only really gap, but also, for example, the presence of margins where the light can enter inside the forest. And in IBP, assign the score on the percentage of open areas present in your sampling area. So you reach the maximum point when you have an open area that is comprised between 1% and 5%. If it's less or if it's more than this percentage, you obtain a less smaller score. So this is just an example. Okay, it's in Italian, but just to you can see the picture. So if this is your plot and it's half an hectare, for example, here you can see a gap. So you estimate the meter square covered by this gap, And in this case, we see it's 400 meters square. And so you calculate the percentage of open area in relation to your sampling area. So in this case, 8%, and it will obtain a score of 2. So this is just an example, but we will see it also in the field. And then the last 3 factors, the one concerning the context. So the first one, the factor H, is the forest continuity over time. And this factor, it can change from country to country. This one was a factor that, for example, for the Italian version of IBP, the CMPF makes some investigation to understand, for example, in Italy, which one was the moment, historical moment, where the forest has its maximum coverage at national level. And so that is considered a time limit to evaluate if the forest that we are investigating, it can be considered continuous or not. So, for example, for Italy, this study brings to light the fact that was the 20s of the 19th century, 20th century, that was the maximum of forest coverage. So from that point, if a forest was present, it can be considered continuous. And so how to evaluate it? Of course, you can make an investigation in your office, let's say seeing documents or aerial photographs or maps or whatever information that you can have on the area. Otherwise, on the field, maybe you can guess it by some the presence of some element that can make you guess that the forest was not there forever. For example, if you find some terraces or walls that can make you guess that there maybe before it was a agricultural area, and then the forest covered it. This can help you to assign the score, let's say, to this factor. So there are 0 for recent forest, and then you can have ancient forests that are partially continuous. It means over time. So in some point, some part of them have been planted, or the ground was worked. Otherwise, it's an ancient forest if it's totally continuous, so not planted or not even partially cleared. And this is important, because the forest continuity, of course, influence the characteristic, for example, of soil. Forest soil is really different of soil that have come from other use. And these, of course, have an influence on the presence of really forest specialized species, for example. So these also can change the composition of species, and the presence of forest over time can host potentially more species than a forest that is just recent. Then the presence inside our forest of aquatic habitats. Of course, water is a really vital element for the presence of organisms. And so the presence of this kind of habitat in our forest can enhance the number of species that potentially can stay there. And the IBP counts the number of type of aquatic habitats. It makes a list of different kinds of aquatic habitats. So this is a list, but also for this factor, there is another sheet that is really more detailed with images and also with description of what a type is, how it is, and so how if counted or not. And the same, it concerns the last factor, that is the rocky habitats. Also here, there is a list, and the IBP evaluates, give a score if there is the presence of no type, one type of more than 2 types. And also for this factor, there is a supporting document that describes every type of rocky habitats. Of course, presence of rocky habitat can potentially host species in forest, but that are more related to the characteristic of rocks that you can find on rocks. And so this can enhance, of course, the potential to host a greater amounts of species. So just in brief, how to survey, but this will be, let's say, it will be more, we will go more in detail directly in the field, but just some basic information. So IBP can be done, can be sampled in a stand, for example, with complete survey. So you work through all your forest, all your stands, and you note all that you see in your sheet, and then to give the score to each factor, you have to report all of your factor to the value of hectares. So you work throughout all your forest. So this is the full sampling. That of course is more detailed, but it can be, of course, it takes a greater amount of time. Otherwise, you can cover just a part of your forest. So, and this, it can, so it's a partial sampling, and then every value is reported to hectares, and you can do it in transit, for example, just then evaluate the area that you have covered in terms of hectare in order then to calculate each score. Or otherwise, you can do it also on area di saggio, survey areas like circular plot, for example. And you can, if you have to sample a larger portion of forest, you can also localize your sampling in a systematic way in order to have a more wider picture of your forest. And just to make some example, for example, here, IBP has been calculated for 2 stands, different stands. So one is an adult stand and another one is a mature stand. And so you can compare, for example, here each of the 2 stands have its score. So you can compare these 2 stand score factor by factor and see a bit the difference. And also you can compare the total score that each one of these has obtained. And I remember you the maximum score is 50 and is 35 for the factors related to management and 15 for the factors related to context. And your results can also be reports in some graphics that help to have a quick vision of your stand, of your sample. For example, these are the 2 stands analyzed before, and here is their potential of biodiversity. So this graph have on the horizontal axis the score obtained for the first 7 factors, and the one in the vertical axis are the score that you obtain for the 3 factors related to the context. So both of them, the adult one and the mature one, are on the higher part of the graph, so they are in a good, let's say, potential of biodiversity. But as you can see, for example, the context is different, and this is nothing that you can influence. But the factor of management are different. So here, if you go and see each factors, you can see which one are okay. and which one instead are poor, let's say. And so these are the factors that can help you in the decision of your kind of management. If you want to consider biodiversity, you should take measure to improve in time these factors, for example. And for example, here I see that there is the, okay, this is in French, the deadwood that is scarce, and also the living trees, the large living trees. So you can decide to leave some more deadwood in your forest to improve these factors, and you can decide to do something to favor some trees that can potentially grow, and then in time also obtain a higher score for this factor, for example. And if you apply IBP at a wider scale, for example, you can visualize which stands are in a good state of high biodiversity potential and which one are more scarce. And so you can take your decision, you can plan your intervention based on these results, for example. And you can also see the results comparing the scores. So, for example, in this area, you can see that the presence of native trees are usually high, while, for example, the factors that are poor are deadwood, laying deadwood, standing deadwood, for example, living large trees. So this can show you on which factor to work to improve the potential biodiversity of your areas. And this is another way to represent the IBP application. So this is a larger forest. And for example, here, for the three factors of deadwood and living trees, large living trees, these circles are in proportion to the value. So from this graph, in a way, you can see where these factors are in a good state and where there is a poor state of this factor. And these are useful elements that help you in the forest planning. So just to conclude about the IBP, of course, is a really easy tool because really there is no complex measurement. Once that you take practice with it, you see that it's quite easy and quick to apply. And of course, you don't need really naturalistic skills. You have to be able to recognize tree species or, in any case, really basic elements of the forest. And it has been used in France since a lot of years. So it's, in a way, it has been tested and be proved to be effective. And okay, I guess that more or less my presentation is finished. So, of course, if you have some questions, remembering that we can have some more detail than when we will apply it on Wednesday. And if you don't, meanwhile, I can tell you that actually we have the field sheet in Italian and French, but they are in these days producing the English version. So maybe we can have the English version on Wednesday. Otherwise, we will use the Italian version, but with the help, of course, of the Italian colleagues, so it won't be that difficult, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much for the explanations. I don't know if Rock, Natasha, Cristina, Andrei, do you need some clarification?
No, I think for now it's okay. It is very well presented. So but some of things we have to see on the field, you know, it will be much clearer then.
Yeah, of course. I mean, about the application, yes, it's more practical, but at least the concept on how IBP is based, I guess, is quite clear. And I can make you an example. For example, we have Pierre Gonin, that is one of the CNPF that improved EBP, created EBP. He was here for the Life GoPro 4, and we went to make some sampling in the San Rossore area. That is one of the systemic, I guess, intervention area. So, for example, just to exercise, we did an EBP inside the one of your plots and just aside. So it will be interesting to test it in your intervention area also here in Casentino, I guess.
Sorry, just to, I don't know if we have well understood. You have just told now that you have been already in one of the life systemic sites in San Rossore to make IBP evaluation.
We were with Pierre Gonin, that is tuning the EBP, so he was here and he has to see different situation in Italy, of course, around where we are. So we take the occasion to go in a place where, because here we are in the Casentino, we have some forest type, and so we take the chance to go in San Rossore where there is different kind of stand to make him see different situation. And I guess that, yes, there was the systemic area there. So,
yes, because maybe if, when you went to the life systemic sites, maybe it could be interested to know in advance to be also present.
No, but sorry, there was, we really planned it. It was here for the monitoring visits, and it was just a decision of last minute decision, sorry. It was not something really planned with really in advance. And then there was Francesca Logli, I guess, that is from the systemic that has bring.
Yes, but when in general, when somebody is doing an activity in a stand of another project, maybe it's good if also the coordinator knows this, and also maybe we could manage something more.
Okay,
no?
sorry,
Just,
yes, you are right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for us, it was not really linked to systemic. It was just the occasion to
just to make, yes,
yeah.
but just to make some more coordinated things, you know. Also because on the contrary, it seems that one partner, even if he's within a project, is doing everything by himself without any coordination inside the project.
Okay. Okay, so I don't know if you have some questions. Otherwise, we can. I guess, Cristina, you already know of course, the Pian dei Ciliegi place. So for Wednesday, we meet there at 9, correct? You will reach it
yes, it
by
is okay.
yourself, and
no, we can meet everybody in Pian dei Ciliegi, because also our partner from Slovenia and Croatia know the place. We'll meet all together at the same hotel, because we'll be at the same hotel. And we have also the agreement with Fabio Ciabatti to come with him directly to Pian dei Ciliegi. So it's more easy to meet everybody in Pian dei Ciliegi, so we save time. You have more time also to explain the most important things directly in the field.
Perfect. Okay, so we will meet directly there at 9. Okay, and okay, I think that's it. And we will bring the field sheet, so you won't need anything specific. Maybe if you have some meters to measure DBH, it can be of help. But that's it, more or less.
E fain da si poklica la kam si šla ti na HBP test?
Okay. Okay, so I will send you by email as soon as is ready the registration also for people, the recording that wasn't here today. And let's meet on Wednesday also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.